But if I were to summarize and give your audience kind of like my top 5 things that they should do tomorrow, my number 1 is...
Welcome to another episode of RippleFX. Today we're having a cybersecurity conversation with our guest, Larry Zorio, Chief Information Security Officer at Mark 43. Be sure to hang around to the end to hear Larry's top 5 actions you can take to keep your data safe. Let's dive in. Larry, welcome to RippleFX. Glad to have you today. For our guest, this is Larry Zorio. He is CISO at Mark 43. We're going to have Larry tell us more about what he does there. Also, a board chair with IJIS Cybersecurity Working Group, and he's also no stranger to podcasting. So, Larry, welcome.
Rafe, it is good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure
no stranger to podcasts, as you can see by my obnoxious headphones that I have on today. But yes, hello everybody. I am Larry Zorio. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Mark 43. Mark 43 is actually a cloud-native public safety offering. We were actually the first ever cloud-native offering for kind of the core systems that a police agency would use, both their records management system, which is where they're filing all their police reports, basically the system that they work out of every day. And then secondly, our second core product is actually computer-aided dispatch, which is basically a 911 system. So when you call 911, you've probably seen it on TV. You see all those screens up on the board. We are some of those systems. So we do that. We do jail management. We're mobile. So it's been a fun journey at Mark 43. You also mentioned IJIS, so the IJIS Institute. Yes, I'm the chair of their cybersecurity working group. It is a great organization that kind of brings public safety, actually practitioners in with government and then also private companies like Mark 43. And we all get together and we share information and we figure out what the market needs, what they're looking for, and we kind of give back through just writing white papers and policies and the podcast. So IJIS has a podcast called Sounds of Safety. I am the host of their cybersecurity show. So we put that out, and it's great. So I've been in cybersecurity for a very long time. It's been 20 plus years, medical technology for a very long time, and now most recently public safety. So that's enough about me. Let's get into what you wanted to talk about, Rafe.
Well, speaking of police departments, we're an MSP, as you know, here at Comtech. We take care of several police departments, so I have a little bit of insight into some of the things you're doing for these clients and what it's like to work with those guys. We do a lot with municipalities as well, so kudos to you on that. You and I chatted earlier before we hopped on the recording today about frameworks and just how important they are and how it may be easier to just adopt a framework versus trying to chase the latest, HIPAA requirement or FTC safeguards rules and things like that. So tell us a little bit about frameworks, your experience in working with those, just what they are, just for our listeners who tend to be more small business and, not as tech savvy as people that are in the business like we are. Just give us a brain dump on framework.
Sure, a brain dump around that. Just putting myself in your audience's shoes. They are getting pummeled every day with requirements, whether it comes from some that you mentioned, FTC, SEC, their local state government, their privacy rules. If they're collecting credit cards, they have to follow PCI. If they're dealing with medical records, they have to follow HIPAA. And, oh, geez, should I go get high trust certified? In the public safety sector, there's FBI has something called CISO. So I could go on and on and on about all the different regulations that many of your customers have to deal with. And that can be a very, very overwhelming scenario that they're in. Not only
Sure.
are they getting attacked, cyber attacked, whether it's a phishing email or what have you, and they have to deal with that, and hopefully, your company's there to help them with that. But then they also have all these external pressures from the government, from SEC, and all the examples I gave. So what we were talking about offline, and it's something that we're doing at IJIS. We're trying to educate our own constituents through the IJIS Institute on, like, take a deep breath, like, don't get overwhelmed by all these, and go find yourself a framework that can map to many of these, because you might think that you're caught up on the FTC one and you're good. All right, I got those 7 and I'm good. I'm doing these 7. But next week or next year, there's going to be something else, and you're going to have to now chase that one. So try to find a framework. There are some good ones out there. Some are very large and complex. And for your audience, I wouldn't recommend really any of those, really, because it really comes down to, you got to be a very, very mature organization to handle some of those. But some of the ones in particular, Rafe, would be, there's one called ISO, but that's a bit larger. But there's some of the smaller ones are CIS. So CIS is a good one. And the one that we recommend at the IJIS Institute is actually NIST. And there are many different frameworks for NIST, but we're recommending the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF. CSF comprises really 6 different domains that you should just go and try to mature in. One is govern. We have identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So it's an approachable framework. And I could just kind of go on and on and on about the benefits, and I'm sure you'll have some follow-up questions to this. But just the one thing is, you need to have a North Star, and you need to have something to guide you. Instead of you trying to see which way the wind is blowing, use one of these frameworks that is mapped to the SEC, that is mapped to the SEC, that is mapped to PCI, that is mapped to CISO. Then you only have to follow one as opposed to many. So test once and comply many is what I like to say around frameworks.
That's great. So I'm very familiar with identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from cyber resilience training I just went through for that certification through DRI.
Yeah.
Govern, however, was not part of that program. So tell us a little bit about what the govern piece is, because I know it's the first step in the framework you just mentioned. Maybe let's start with that and just do just a quick overview of the other.
The other ones. So NIST came out with 2.0 recently, a couple months ago. And the big change to it was including govern. And when it comes to govern is all around, like, having that plan in place, like a documented plan that you're going to go and attack. It's around having policies and procedures in place in your company. Like, think of it as the foundation. It is the foundation of your house. You got to have a foundation before you could start putting up studs and building floor after floor after floor.
Right.
So that is what govern is. I say this all the time. It is definitely the least sexiest piece of NIST. It is kind of the boring piece. No one wants to go and write policies and do audits and make sure people are doing risk assessments. They don't. Like, I want to be frank. Like, that to most people is boring, but it really is important. Like, you just got to spend a little bit of time to build that foundation. So that's what govern is. Identify. You can only protect what you know you have.
Right.
Goes with anything, right? Even your house, right? If you have some fine jewelry in your bedroom, you know it's there, so maybe you put it in a safe. But if you don't know it's there, then you don't know how to protect it. So identify is really all around identifying what you have, the assets that you have, building an inventory of it, and really kind of figuring out how you're going to put controls in place to protect all of those.
So I'm going to butt in on that phase there.
Sure.
In the DRI program, this phase also includes things like a risk analysis and a business impact analysis. Maybe speak to those two for a moment, if you would.
Yeah. It's I'd say this is gonna be a theme. I'd say it's all very important, right?
Yeah.
You have to do a business impact analysis, because if you don't, if you're a business leader and you're trying to put one of these in place, and you start going around and you're interviewing different parts of your company, and like, all right, what data is important to you? Well, everything is important to everybody.
Sure.
So you really got to put together a business impact analysis and start looking at, for this particular piece of data, if we were to lose it, or if it would become unavailable, what would that truly mean to the company? All right. Is it gonna close the company down? Is it just gonna force you to maybe connect with your customers in a different way? So you really have to kind of put the process in place there. When it comes to risk assessments, that is a great way of prioritizing what you want to go after.
Right.
You might some organizations have dedicated server rooms and data centers where all their servers are, and they need to go through a risk assessment to learn how to prioritize the physical security. But if you're a company where everything's in the cloud, then when you do the risk assessment, you're not going to prioritize physical security, because you don't need to focus on that. So again, it gets down to defining all your assets, where your data is, and then start doing that business impact analysis and those risk assessments against it. Yeah. So you know where to focus.
And not to steer us off course, because I'm coming at it from a cyber resilience point of view, and I know we're talking about an IT framework, and there's overlap, and I understand that too. But a lot of our clients may even get hung up on that one step and go, "Well, everything I do is in the cloud. I have this one, software as a service piece that runs 90% of the business." So that's a quick exercise, because it's all, at some cloud provider.
Yeah. I have this conversation a lot. I even have it with employees that I work with, right? we do vendor risk assessments, and someone will say, well, we're buying a software, but it's all in the cloud, so we don't have to worry about it. But you really do, unfortunately. I think the good thing is you definitely can transfer some risk to a vendor in the cloud. You're paying them a service. They should. Well, here's some good tips for everybody. When you're doing a vendor assessment and you're talking to a vendor, you want to make sure that they have some key things in place. You're going to transfer risk to them, but you want to make sure that they are doing vulnerability scanning of their environment. Because if your data is going to be uploaded into their environment, you want to make sure that environment is secure. You want to make sure they have basic controls, like they have a password policy, they're using multi-factor authentication, they're doing backups of your data. It's a really good question to ask too. So yes, you don't remove all the risk, but you do remove some of it. You kind of pay to remove some of it, right? Because you're paying them a service. Yeah. But yes, you still have to do the assessment, because unfortunately, there are a lot of vendors and a lot of companies out there that just ignore security, and they're not doing a good job with it. So you need to make sure that they are doing a good job.
Oh, and we see that happen all the time, especially, I hate to say it, especially in the healthcare industry. Some of the more recent events that have taken healthcare providers down for, 3 weeks in some cases.
Yeah, Rafe, it's interesting too, like even some of the biggest breaches that we've seen in the headlines, like in the world, a lot of them are related to a third party, like a weakness in one of your vendors.
Yes.
Like, it happens all the time. So that's why vendor assessments are important.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. And I think a lot of small businesses don't even have that thought. They just have complete trust in the third party and move on to, the rest of their business. So you don't really camp out and interview these people, because in a lot of cases they don't have another choice. It's, if it's epic, I got to use them. I got to
use it.
I got to take what they're offering. So, yeah. Well, hey, let's move on to the next piece of that, which would be the protect.
Yes. So having basic controls. To simplify it for everybody, you want to make sure that you're protecting your environment. How can you do that? You can do that with antivirus software, malware protection. We hear a lot about firewalls. And Rafe, I'm sure you guys can help with firewalls, because firewalls can be complicated. But that's just some really good kind of core protections you can have in place. I actually think one of the most important protections that especially a small business can have is phishing email protection.
Yes.
Phishing emails is the biggest, most prevalent threat that really any company has. Honestly, because it's just so easy to go attack a company with an email. So that would be an example of just some other kind of examples you can do there.
Oh yeah, but yeah. Speaking of phishing emails, the slide I just reviewed recently. So think of yourself and 4 of your coworkers. Odds are one of the 5 of you, which is 20%, will click on a phishing email next year. So think of your little circle, and you probably know, I know exactly. That's going to be, Robert. He's going to want to be the one to click on it. But 1 out of 5 people is going to click a phishing email. And it's the way in for 91% of all bad cyber attacks are triggered through a phishing email. We just got, when I was telling you about it before we started, we pressed the record button here, but we just saw one come in here. It was the best one I've ever seen. It was, you could tell they put a lot of thought and research into this. They knew who our bookkeeper was. They had her name, email address. They had her CEO's name and email address. They created a fake string of emails, an email thread that was probably had 4 replies to it. And they were posing as a public speaking coaching consultancy. They had met Mike at a conference. They had talked about their services. Mike was interested because he does a lot of speaking. And, they had fake replies from Mike where, hey, your proposal looks good. I'll let our person here know to go ahead and cut you a check. They had generated an invoice for $46,000. And I credit it all to our wonderful training that when she got the email, she thought this just seems fishy. So she went to Mike and said, "Is this for real?" And he said, "Lord heavens, no, that's not real." Yes. I'm so glad you didn't fall for that. But it was the best crap. Spelling, punctuation, everything's perfect. I mean, they even had the email headers in there with fake times and days and all that. So,
well, bravo to that employee. Like, honestly, she should be celebrated, because that sounds like a very sophisticated one. The reason why we can't necessarily rely on bad grammar and bad spelling anymore is because these attackers are using AI.
Oh yeah,
they're using AI to craft these, and AI is not making a mistake with grammar and spelling. Right. They're not. Yeah. So yeah, she should be celebrated. That's great.
Oh yeah, and it seems like it's hard to have a cybersecurity conversation at all without mentioning phishing.
Yeah,
it
is. So yeah, back to you gotta have some protections in place, or at the very least, you got to be training your employees, which it sounds like you guys have some good training.
Oh yeah,
so that's great.
I'm curious, Larry, because you're in this all the time. Phishing, hacks that are they're pulled off by a phishing email versus, we think of, they figured a way in through, another means, whether it was like, hey, they found their way in through the firewall, or they got credentials for, VPN access or whatever. Do you see much of the other stuff, or is it really like majority phishing emails?
No, majority is definitely phishing. Yeah. Absolutely. Like huge majority. But you do see other pieces, right? Especially I mentioned firewalls, they can be complex. So, having ports open ports that shouldn't be open on a firewall. I don't want to get too techy because I don't know how much your audience is going to understand this, but the firewall has a lot of different ports, right? And it's just ways in and out of the company using this firewall device, and it can kind of protect. And if some of those ports are left open, it's a great way for attackers to get in. They can use remote tools like maybe some of your audience uses for themselves to like connect to a server from their home. And the attacker can do the same thing. They can find a back door in your firewall and go right through. So that's why I mentioned it before. I'll probably mention it 3-4 more times in this episode. Multi-factor is so important. Multi-factor authentication, MFA. If for whatever reason an attacker does get in, does grab somebody's credentials, well, not only do they need their username and password, but they're also going to need the authenticator code or however you use your multi-factor. So huge bang for your buck rolling out MFA. I would say it's probably the number one recommendation I would have.
Good stuff. Yeah, we beat that drum a lot too, the MFA drum for sure.
Yeah.
So we're moving through the NIST CSF, which is Cybersecurity Framework.
Yep.
And next would be detect.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. And I want to get to, let's try to blow through these a little quick because I do want to get to like the benefits. Like your audience might be listening and thinking, well, so what? Like, Rafe's going to help me do all this. Like, and he will, but like, why do I care about this? So I want to get to why you should care about it. But detect, detect all comes down to monitoring and auditing what's happening in your environment. Like I mentioned, a lot of those tools, right? Your antivirus and your malware protections, or the phishing email protections, or the firewall. You need to have a way of monitoring that to be able to detect something that's happening in your environment. So that's really key.
Gotcha. So the magic phrase or magic words I'm looking for on the protect and detect phases would be, drum roll, zero trust.
Oh, well, yes. Yeah, we talk about it all the time. You probably talk about it with your customers, right? Zero trust has been around for a very long time, but it has become this buzzword over the past, let's call it 5 years. And it's really around having different controls at different levels, like making, and a lot of it can be behind the scenes, but making either the user or an attacker go through many hoops and not trusting them and having them do MFA, having them enter a password, having them maybe even do an extra password, or looking at the behavior of the user to understand if you're going to allow them in. So zero trust is great. The other thing around zero trust is starting to get tied to different requirements and standards that are out there. So if you start following zero trust, which you can follow a framework to meet zero trust. Let me make this very clear because I still am very strong on a framework. But you start doing those, and then you might be able to get some grants. You might be able to satisfy some needs that your city has or your state has. So, you could probably talk forever about zero trust, Rafe, I'm sure. Yeah,
but I'll spare us for the sake of we
could do a whole episode just on zero trust, and maybe we should actually.
And don't think we won't, but yeah.
So the next one is respond. You have to be prepared that something will happen. Like Rafe said that 1 in 5 people are clicking on a phishing link. So if you have 100 people, that means 20 people are clicking on that link. And you need to know how to respond. What are you going to do when they click on it? What are you going to do when they get a piece of malware on their laptop? What are you going to do when they get some ransomware on a server? So you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to respond. Rafe, I'm sure your company can help with that. There are other partners that can help as well with response. I mean, you could have your own internal team response. But I think the one takeaway around that one is I think it's important that you do what's called tabletop exercises. Just do a walkthrough of what to do when something happens. Like, do I need to call the lawyers? Do I need to call the FBI? Or not even that. Let's take it back internally. Like, something happens. Do you know how to call IT? Like, who's the person in IT that you should be calling, or security?
Right.
So practice those types of things. Yeah.
Perfect. Incident response. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And then we're at the last one now, which is recover.
Yep. So that kind of matches a little bit of what I was saying, but recover is all around how you can recover. It actually gets back, even Rafe, to what you were saying around business impact analysis, is right. Like, if you have an incident and it impacts your whole company, what are you going to recover first? Exactly. Are you going to recover the payroll system first? Are you going to recover email first? Your records management system, whatever it is. So you need to spend some time there. The big control around recovery is definitely backups. Backups are so important. We talk a lot about ransomware nowadays. It's everywhere. I'm in the public safety space. So, I mean, municipalities, police forces, they're getting hit with ransomware all the time. And the best control you can really have is having really strong backups. You could do that on your own, or you're going to push your cloud provider or your SaaS provider to do great backups for you as well. So that's key. That's key. And that's another boring one that people like to ignore. You know, it's this boring, we got to do backups. I get it. It's like changing your oil. No one wants to go change their oil. It's, you got to take half an hour out of your day to go do it, but you have to do it.
It's your method of restoring everything. So
yes,
we're big fans of having it in multiple locations. Maybe there's I know for our clients, we've got a separate physical device in the house that things get backed up to, and then from there it's sent to a cloud backup. Because one of the things that for ransomware folks target are your backups. They want to encrypt those too, so you don't have a way to just put things back together so easily, and you're more likely to pay the ransom if you can't even get to your backups. Yeah. So yes, very important.
It is very important. It really is. If you don't mind, I do want to kind of talk to your audience for a second here on, like, all right, Larry, like, why do I care? That's great that you just went through the whole framework with me, but why do I care? There's a few reasons why you should care about doing this. You need to have a plan. All right. You got to have a path forward, and things get overwhelming. So that's number one. Just don't be overwhelmed. This is really good. It's really good to kind of build a plan. Secondly, it brings instant credibility to yourself. So if you are the IT person or the security person, and maybe you're going for a budget, you're trying to get money to buy the latest phishing tool because you need it, and you don't have a plan behind that ask, there's a very slim chance that you're going to get budget. But if you go to your management and you say, boss, executive, I put together a plan and I understand our maturity today. And on a scale of 1 to 5, when it comes to security, we're at like a 1.5. But no fear. I put together this plan. We're going to follow NIST. And over the next 2 years, our goal is to get to 3.5 or 4. And this first year, these are some of the controls that I think we should tackle. I think we should tackle phishing emails. I think we should revamp our password policy. I think we should put in multi-factor authentication. Now, all of a sudden, you're bringing real credibility to your ask and your peers as well, because you're going to have a lot of projects throughout the year, and you're going to be able to have this framework to back it up. yeah, we have this project. Sure, it is going to be a little bit of a disruption. You know, you're not all used to doing multi-factor authentication, but take a look at this plan, this framework. This is why we're doing this. So that's really important. And then I think lastly, if I were to kind of a third reason why is you mentioned the FTC and the SEC. There are a lot of guidelines that are coming out or rules that are coming around boards and how boards need to have involvement when it comes to cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that means them actually developing the strategy themselves, I doubt it. A board's not going to do that, but a board needs to be aware of what's going on with cybersecurity. So I'm actually probably even talking to actual board members here as well, or your customers. For your customers, they might start getting asked to go to board meetings and say, what's our status on cybersecurity? What are we doing about it? You go to them with this framework, you show them the maturity that we're at, and this is where we need to get to. You could start putting metrics behind it. So that's really key. And then as a board member, I think it would be some great questions to ask IT leadership in the company. What are we doing around our cybersecurity maturity? Have we thought about following a framework? NIST is a great one. So that's just some examples of how I would use that and the benefits of it.
That's great. All great points. And I think that NIST CSF that we went through together is a great idea. And I think it's easy enough to wrap your head around that as a framework. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I mentioned the FTC safeguards rule. It's been around for a while, but now they've decided to actually start enforcing it. And to the point earlier, rather than chasing those requirements, just adopt that framework that you just covered for us. And that satisfies FTC plus a lot more.
It does. It is going to. It absolutely is going to. Yes. Agreed.
Good deal. Well, Larry, you have some. Let's get to the nuggets part of the.
Yeah. Well, we forgot to tease it at the beginning, but I always like to leave the audience with actually like actionable things that they can do. Sure. Like it's great for us to talk about risk assessments and policies, but that's going to take a while. You should do it. You need to do it. But if I were to summarize and give your audience kind of like my top 5 things that they should do tomorrow, staying on theme, my number 1 is at least go identify a framework. You could use GPT to even ask the question. If you know you have to follow SEC or PCI, you got to follow HIPAA, put that all in and say, what is the best framework I should follow? So that'll be number 1. At least identify. Get started on it, okay? Some of the other ones that actually, Rafe, I think you might be able to help with all these. MFA, I mentioned it. MFA, that is number 1. You got to be doing MFA, even in your personal life. All right, your banking account, your health insurance website, even Netflix, even Netflix, right? You need to have MFA. It is the best bang for your buck. Got to do it.
Oh,
got to do that.
We help with that. Okay, for sure. And strongly recommend that.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page with that one. Next one is you got to do some sort of vulnerability management in your company. It sounds scary, but there are a lot of affordable tools and services that can help you do this. What I mean by that is you need to understand where the holes are in your software, on your servers, on your laptops, on your firewalls. And you do it by running scans against them. And these tools will identify vulnerabilities that then you need to go close. And you can do it, or a partner can help you do that.
Yeah, we can definitely help with some of that too.
Okay, good. Next one I mentioned, the last 2 I mentioned too before, so this is more of a wrap up, is backups. You got to have backups. I would push, if you're doing them yourself, then certainly try to go at it but you got to test those backups. Use a partner to help you out there. On the cloud side, push your vendors. Make sure that they're doing backups of your data. Ask them before you enter into contract with them, and then also ask them periodically, once a year, a checkup. How are you doing with the backups? Prove to me that my backups are working correctly. So that would be big, and it gets back to the ransomware thing. Just having solid backups would be huge. And then finally, I already mentioned this one as well. You got to have some malware protection, some antivirus protections in place. Many different softwares out there for that. And I'm sure, Rafe, you can help customers identify all those. But there's a lot. That can be a little overwhelming, identifying the right one for you. But again, they run the gamut. Very expensive ones, very affordable ones, some in the middle. But really, those are it. So to recap, definitely a framework. Get MFA set up. Do some vulnerability management. Have some backups. And finally, have some malware protections.
Perfect. And look, these podcasts are not meant to be pitches for Comtech, but if you're a client listening, take a deep breath. A lot of the stuff we're doing for you, and hopefully this helped educate you on some of the things we are doing behind the scenes, just to keep you focused on what you do best. But great advice, Larry, on the framework. And, even if you do have an MSP or someone taking care of you, I think it's important that you still embrace that and do your part of that. Because, some of those pieces that we covered obviously can be outsourced. And that's one of the reasons we're here and you're here for those technical pieces that a business owner just is going to have to outsource. Mm-hmm. So great stuff. NIST CSF. Use the old trusted Chat GPT to learn more, or Google it, or your choice. Mm-hmm. Larry, thank you so much for being with us today, and hope to have you back for future episodes. We can dive into some of those things we talked about deeper. I know with resilience and NIST and all these things we touched on, each little leg of those can be an episode by themselves. So thank you again. And guys, be sure to check out Larry's podcast. We'll put the link in the description, and hope to catch you on the next one. Larry, thanks again.
Thanks, Rafe. Bye, everybody.